If you want to understand an economy in stress, don't start with speeches. Start with one basic item people touch every day: sugar. Because sugar reveals three things at once: foreign currency pressure, credit pressure, and policy choices. And when those three collide, the damage doesn't stay on paper. It hits farms, factories, jobs, and household budgets. Today, we're not doing opinions. We're doing a structured breakdown with numbers. And we'll use one case: how decisions around dollars and imports created a chain reaction that threatened local sugar production, even though Egypt can almost cover its own needs. The model card. What problem are we analyzing? This episode answers one question: how can a country produce most of its sugar and still end up with shortages, then oversupply, then factory losses, then farmers at risk? The mechanism is not mysterious. It's usually a mix of 1. Foreign currency rationing, the state deciding who gets dollars and when. 2. Credit tightening, banks pulling back lending, especially when interest rates are high. 3. Distorted price signals, when administrative decisions push the market away from real costs. Those three together can create a trap. You solve a shortage today by importing big, but you quietly weaken production capacity for tomorrow. That's where the drama lives, in the delayed bill. 3 terms you must know, simple definitions. Term 1, FX rationing, foreign currency rationing. This is when dollars are scarce and access is controlled, not by a free market, but by approvals, priorities, and timing. Example: a producer needs dollars for inputs, but the approval arrives late or not at all. Production slows. Term 2, working capital. Working capital is the short-term money that keeps a business alive between paying costs and getting revenue. Example: a sugar factory must pay farmers and salaries before it sells the final sugar. If bank credit freezes, the chain breaks. Term 3, price signal. A price signal tells producers what to do: plant more, plant less, expand, or shut down. If the market price drops below cost because of a policy shock, the signal becomes stop producing, even if the country needs the product. Now, with these 3 terms, we can read the sugar story as an economic system, not as noise. The data triad. 3 sets of numbers that matter. Data point A. Egypt's sugar balance is close, not hopeless. A widely used benchmark source estimates Egypt's sugar production around 3.0 million tons, while consumption is around 3.4 million tons, meaning the gap is roughly 0.4 million tons in a typical year. That gap is meaningful, but it's not import 1 million tons or collapse. apps.fas.usda.gov. So Egypt is not structurally incapable of producing sugar. It is near sufficient, with a manageable import gap. Data point B. The state-approved extraordinary imports, 1 million tons. In March 2024, reports describe approval to import 1 million tons of sugar. Arab finance. Think about that scale relative to the estimated gap of approximately 0.4 million tons. Even if you assume uncertainty and buffer stock needs, 1 million tons is not a small correction. It is a market-moving shock. Data point C. The aftermath shows heavy stock and losses. By late 2025, reporting described stockpiles around 1.3 million tons, while factories sold at about 26,000 Egyptian pounds per ton against costs above 30,000 Egyptian pounds, with losses reported in a range of 3,000 to 6,000 Egyptian pounds per ton. asharkbusiness.com, +1. And at the same time, the government's indicative procurement price for beet was reported cut for 2025/26 to 2,000 Egyptian pounds per ton, with cane around 2,500 Egyptian pounds per ton. Enterprise. Now we have the core picture. A country near sufficient, a massive import shock, followed by stockpiles and reported losses, while procurement pricing gets squeezed. That combination is exactly how you create a production boycott without anyone saying the word boycott. The system does it automatically. What actually happened? The chain reaction. Let's walk through the mechanism in a clean sequence. Step 1. Dollar scarcity turns imports into a power lever. When dollars are tight, access becomes a gate. Who gets dollars? When? For what? At what priority? That's FX rationing. And once FX rationing becomes normal, markets don't behave normally. Because the private sector doesn't just need dollars for luxury imports, it needs dollars for inputs, spare parts, packaging, fuel, logistics, everything that keeps domestic production running. So when FX is rationed, the real question becomes, do we allocate scarce dollars to feed local production, or do we spend them to import finished goods? This question matters because importing finished goods can look like a quick win. Shelves fill, prices calm, headlines improve. But production capacity is not a shelf. If you damage it, it doesn't recover in a week. Step 2. Large imports distort the price signal. If a market suddenly gets flooded with supply, prices drop. Now, cheaper sugar sounds good to consumers, but the issue is not cheap. The issue is below cost. When factories sell below cost, they lose cash. When they lose cash, they stop paying on time. And once payment is delayed, farmers cut planting and suppliers cut delivery. That's how an import decision becomes a production collapse 2 seasons later. And this isn't theoretical. Reporting described imported sugar being cheaper by about 4,000 Egyptian pounds per ton compared to locally produced sugar, an enormous gap in a commodity business. Aram Online. If imported product undercuts local cost by thousands per ton, the price signal to local producers is brutal. Shrink, pause, or exit. Step 3. Credit turns from lifeline into a choke point. Now, add interest rates. In early 2024, Egypt's central bank raised rates to around 21.25% deposit and 22.25% lending. Reuters +1. Later, by late 2025, reporting described deposit around 21% and lending around 22%, still very high borrowing costs in a production economy. Reuters +1. High rates matter because they decide whether working capital is survivable. A sugar factory is not a tech startup. It can't pivot. It has seasonal inputs, fixed assets, payroll, maintenance, energy, transport, and a farming ecosystem attached to it. So when banks tighten lending or delay it, factories can't bridge the season. And once factories can't bridge the season, the damage travels backward. Farmers don't get paid on time. Farmers reduce planting. Input suppliers pull back. Harvest volumes drop. Factories run under capacity. Unit costs rise. And the next season gets worse. This is how a problem in dollars turns into a problem in jobs. Step 4. The citizen pays twice. Once now, once later. This is the part people feel. First payment. When sugar shortages happen, prices explode. That already happened in recent years during shortage waves. Second payment. When policy reactions overshoot, local producers lose money, credit freezes, and the production base weakens, meaning future shortages become more likely, and the next price shock can be worse. So the household experience becomes a loop. 1. Shortage. 2. Panic prices. 3. Emergency imports. 4. Oversupply. 5. Factory losses. 6. Farmer stress. 7. Reduced planting. 8. Next shortage. That loop is not a market failure alone. It's a policy and credit system failure. Why this became socially explosive. When a household hears stocks are 1.3 million tons while living through price pressure, it creates anger and confusion. Because the issue isn't only, is there sugar? It's, who has access, at what price, through what channels, and who carries the loss. And when factories reportedly lose 3,000 to 6,000 Egyptian pounds per ton, someone must absorb that loss. asharkbusiness.com +1. If factories absorb it, they cut procurement, wages, or operations. If banks absorb it, they tighten credit. If the state absorbs it, it shows up as fiscal stress elsewhere. If nobody absorbs it, the sector breaks. And when the sector breaks, households don't celebrate lower prices, because lower prices don't last if the production base collapses. That's why cheap imports can become expensive later. The state's role, not as a villain, as a system designer. We don't need moral language here, we need system logic. When dollars are scarce, any state has to manage priorities. But the quality of management shows up in outcomes. Did the policy stabilize prices without damaging production? Did it protect consumers without collapsing farmer incentives? Did it use imports as a bridge or as a replacement? And here is the measurable consequence. By late 2025, the state imposed a 3-month ban on refined sugar imports, an explicit signal that the earlier import situation had become unsustainable for local producers. Manasseh +1. When a government bans imports to protect local producers, it's basically admitting the market was pushed out of balance. But bans are not magic either, because companies can shift to importing raw sugar for refining or exploit exceptions, and the underlying issue remains: credit plus cost plus pricing plus FX allocation. Manasseh +1. Counterexample. What would a production-first fix look like? Here's a counterexample, purely as economics, not politics. If the real gap is roughly 0.4 million tons, you can cover it while keeping production alive by combining targeted imports closer to the estimated gap, transparent timelines, guaranteed procurement payments, and working capital credit lines for factories during peak procurement seasons. That keeps the price signal functional, instead of import huge, crash price, then ban imports, then beg factories to survive. Because once factories accumulate losses and stock, they don't invest, they freeze. And when factories freeze, farmers don't just lose income, they lose planning. A farmer's biggest enemy is not hard work, it's uncertainty. Heuristics. What should citizens watch next time? If you want to read the economy like a dashboard, watch these 4 indicators. 1. Import decisions versus the real supply gap. If imports massively exceed the gap, expect a shock, either shortage or oversupply later. 2. Factory gate price versus estimated cost. If factory prices stay below costs for long, expect delayed payments and reduced production next season. 3. Credit conditions. High interest rates plus tighter lending equals working capital stress, especially for seasonal industries. 4. Administrative controls. Import bans, exceptions, indicative prices, FX approvals. These are signals that the market is not clearing naturally, and volatility risk rises. Closing sugar looks simple, but it's not. It's a system: fields, water, inputs, transport, factories, banks, foreign currency, and policy. When dollars are used as a short-term tool and credit becomes a choke point, the country can end up doing something that looks irrational from the street, undermining local production while trying to stabilize daily life. And that's the real lesson. In economies under stress, the danger is not only scarcity. The danger is policy moves that solve today by borrowing from tomorrow, until tomorrow arrives with a bill. Next Monday, we'll take the same framework, FX rationing, working capital, price signals, and apply it to another essential sector, so we keep building a clear economic ground course step by step.